All right, good afternoon. My name is Petra Al-Sufi. I am an Outreach and Partnerships Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. We're a research and education organization that does research about American Muslims and other faith communities. I'm also on the board of the Michigan Center for Civic Education. And 17, 18 years ago, I was in your place as We the People participant. So I'm very happy to be, seeing you now as a judge. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Wong. I'm a retired attorney and former judge. I'm on the National Board of Directors for the Center for Civic Education, and I live in Boise, Idaho. I'm happy to see your smiling faces.
Good afternoon. I think you're the first team that is wearing the exact same outfit that I have ever judged, and I just want to tip my hat to that. Very classy. So my name is Maria Garnett. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I am a public policy professional specializing in state government. So I spent 5 years as a nonpartisan analyst and evaluator of government performance for the Virginia General Assembly. I'm now a policy advisor for the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services, and this is my 3rd year of involvement with We the People.
Right, students.
Thank you for allowing us to testify before you today. We are a unit composed of sophomores and juniors from East Grand Rapids High School. I'm Roshana Saidisamova.
I'm Kira Frang.
I'm Sydney Timmer.
And I'm Sydney Muller, and we are coached by the lovely Adam Horace and Ben Langholtz. We are Unit 6.
All right, welcome. And good catch on the outfit. I thought it was just my eye playing trick on me, but it's very nice. All right, so I'm going to read the question, and then you have 4 minutes to give your opening remarks, and then we'll have follow-up questions. So the question is, Thomas Hobbes noted that life is in a state of nature, is solitary, poor, nasty, and brutish. In short, how has the human condition changed over time, and how is the change reflected in our expectations of government? Should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designated to improve the conditions of all people? What are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them?
As Socrates contends, no human condition is ever permanent. Then you will not be overjoyed in good fortune, nor too scornful in misfortune. Thomas Hobbes believed that life without government was not guaranteed. One of his most prevalent fears was the violent death by the hands of another. Therefore, Hobbes advocated for a government that protected the right to life despite any trade-offs. Similarly, in the present day, the right to life is valued as a foundational societal principle.
Due to the constant evolution of the human condition, life is no longer valued as solely one's right to live, but rather one's right to pursue passions. The Declaration of Independence illustrates this by providing not only the right to life, but also the rights of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Natural rights philosophy of government has now expanded to account for different forms of speech, assembly, belief, privacy, and due process.
Despite changes in the human condition, threats such as viruses and pandemics are not exclusively modern. However, the perpetual responsibility of the government to protect its citizens' well-being has intensified. According to the CDC, the COVID-19 pandemic has claimed the lives of over 561,000 Americans. As current dangers require a unified response, new policies must be guided by the philosophy of classical republicanism.
Moreover, in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, a classical republicanism approach would provide rapid improvement to the human condition. In January 2021, President Biden issued a national mask mandate. Thus, Americans every day give up their right to choose what they wear in order to achieve nationwide protection. This classical Republican sentiment found in the preamble vows to ensure domestic tranquility and promote the general welfare.
The human condition cannot be improved on classical republicanism policies alone. Natural rights is also imperative in many circumstances. For instance, the Equality Act was passed by the House of Representatives this year, and if passed by the Senate, it would ban discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation, specifically in areas of employment and housing. The act would create more protections for the LGBTQ plus individuals and assure that all citizens will be viewed equal by the government under the law. As the human condition changes, natural rights philosophy must remain present.
Today, Americans have a multitude of global threats to the environment that will affect the future of the human condition. Former President Obama once stated, "We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it." Global temperatures are rising at a record rate due to the greenhouse emission produced by industrialization. In 2018, 22% of total greenhouse gas emissions were produced by American factories. Policies to combat this, such as the recent pledge by President Biden to cut emissions to net zero by 2050, are imperative for the future of the planet and humanity.
Additionally, Americans today face vast exposure to misinformation from digital media, which is a pivotal domestic challenge. According to Pew Research Center, 67% of adults say their news source presents facts that favor one side of an issue, intending to mislead the public. As seen during the January 6th Capitol riots, misinformation can lead to chaotic events that threaten democratic ideals through undemocratic means. To combat this, the US would benefit from a misinformation task force, similar to Australia's Electoral Integrity Assurance Task Force, created to limit a misleading election in 2018.
All in all, we contend as the human condition continues to evolve and face new challenges, classical republicanism policies should be implemented more within our society. However, the natural rights philosophy that our country was founded on and Hobbes advocated for must remain intact and of ample importance. Thank you, and we are now ready for your questions.
Thank you so much. So you spoke about misinformation and its danger to democracy. What role should the government, if any, play in combating misinformation? So what role should the government play in combating misinformation, if any at all?
The government should be playing a role in combating misinformation, however, not directly to the people talking themselves. That'd be a violation of our First Amendment right to free speech. So one way the government could solve this issue is put more pushing to these companies to enforce different misinformation flagging throughout their companies.
For example, Twitter and Facebook have taken initiatives to place misinformation tags on posts that may be misleading towards the public. This way, it ensures that their First Amendment right is not being broken. However, the individuals digesting the information still have the correct information and still can decide to look further into why the information posted was incorrect.
Although social media is a marketplace of ideas, us as American citizens must understand that there can be a lot of hate speech and misinformed rhetoric. So if our United States government works with our citizens and works with the United States by working with these companies and pushing towards more knowledge and knowledge about informing yourselves as a citizen, what is misinformation and how many news outlets you should actually see.
While it is important for the government to not be the arbiter of truth, it is also important for the government to make sure that while these private companies implement fact-checking services, that these fact-checkers are credible. For example, in Mark Zuckerberg's testimony to Congress, he mentioned that fact-checkers went through a rigorous standard in order to become fact-checkers. However, it was proven that one of said fact-checkers had ties to white supremacist organizations.
So I have a question about the challenge of climate change that you have discussed and cited. And you talked about a policy of reducing emissions as one policy that could help that domestic and global challenge. What other specific policies other than reducing emissions would be effective in addressing that domestic and global challenge?
One policy that the government could implement is giving tax cuts or cutting taxes on car brands that offer electric vehicle options.
Ultimately, money speaks. So when we look, there is a company, a Michigan-based company called Wolverine Corporation. It is specifically a shoe company. This shoe company actually put a lot of toxic waste into our Great Lakes. as I stated before, money does speak. So if United States citizens are able to work together and use social media to discuss these specific corporations that aren't necessarily abiding by climate change standards or aren't up to code, speaking with these speaking as United States citizens and working with one another to boycott some of these corporations can lead to more change in a quicker, orderly fashion as compared to our federal government.
Additionally, another way that the government can get involved in combating climate change is by producing incentives to create green energy. The United States uses 80% non-renewable resources, such as fossil fuels and natural gas. And so cutting down on these non-renewable resources and using other alternatives that are renewable will greatly influence the environment for the better.
Additionally, as our government really responds to our people, it's important that our president and the people speaking on behalf of our country are advocating for combating this climate crisis. So if they're combating and using this good rhetoric to make sure that the American people know that this is an important topic that we need to combat, it will be more likely that Americans will take steps in their own paths, say not driving cars as often, to help reduce these emissions and things contributing to our climate crisis.
So you all have talked about the types of situations that would require or justify the government taking a classical republicanism approach to curbing people's individual liberties. But what limits, if any, are there on the government's ability to do that? And could you give me some examples of, how we know when the government has gone too far?
One example of the government going too far with classical republicanism was after the 9/11 terrorist attacks with the implementation of the Patriot Act. This act originally was created to limit people's ability to just have whatever and have the government be more regulatory on essentially checking what people are posting and what people are talking about in their cell phone receipts. So this was originally had good intent. However, the government ended up spying on people's different electronics in ways that they shouldn't have, which was an extreme step where that shouldn't have happened.
In addition, specifically looking at the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis, the federal government handed a lot of these rights to states, specifically looking at Michigan and how Michigan handled it. We were number four in March in regards to our COVID cases. Governor Gretchen Whitmer implemented a lot of these classical republicanism rights and approached the COVID-19 pandemic as a war. But us as United States citizens are more natural rights leaning. So there was obviously lots of pushback and lots of pushback in regards to these classical republicanism approaches in regards to executive orders about about the COVID-19 pandemic. But due to this pushback, we saw that Governor Gretchen Whitmer has implemented more natural rights leaning oriented policies, pleading Michiganders to wear their masks and work with one another to help end this crisis.
Additionally, the Supreme Court can place a good check on classical republicanism, as many of their court cases decided lean more towards natural rights oriented beliefs. For instance, in the court case Brown v. Board of Education, this protected African Americans' children's right to get an education and go to school.
Have any other examples of how the Supreme Court has been very clear about when government places these limits, the kinds of rules that it has to follow?
Yes, another example of how the Supreme Court influences natural rights is through Masterpiece Cake Shop v. Colorado. The Supreme Court ruled that in favor of Masterpiece Cake Shop's natural rights through the First Amendment right to religion.
Additionally, as seen through Snyder v. Phelps, the court protected hate speech under the First Amendment, meaning that the government cannot limit hate speech, which is your freedom of speech is a natural right.
All right, and that's time.
All right, perfect. So great job. we're going to give you some feedback. I really enjoyed listening to your presentation, your open statement, the fact that you all participated equally, not just during the open statement, but also during the follow-up questions. You had a range of issues that you addressed. Most of them tend to be a little bit more on the recent history than, history, which is not a word, but historical. But still, you had a wide application of just topics and how you connected them to republicanism, but also to natural rights, and you had a clear understanding, and you gave local examples. So I really like how you gave both the local and the national examples, and kind of help connected the dots here. The only feedback I have is, again, I wish you used a little bit more of the court cases. I know you use some of them, but I wish you had more of the constitutional, application or constitutional support, and used a little bit more of the historical examples. But otherwise, you guys did phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I very much enjoyed your testimony and presentation. It was relatively easy to follow. Obviously, you focused on climate change and misinformation. I think you should think about your comment regarding the nationwide mask mandate, because I'm not sure it was actually a mandate. And one other feedback for improvement that I would give you is that there is no question that all of you are very articulate, very knowledgeable, and very thorough. And one of the downsides of being thorough is that while it's tough, because I really did enjoy listening to each of you give a very articulate, knowledgeable, thorough answer to the cross-examination questions. But when that happens, that limits the number of cross-examination questions that we can ask. As a matter of fact, we only got to ask 4 in an 8-minute cross-examination session. Just think what it would have been if it had only been 6. So everyone in this competition generally does a very good job on the 4-minute presentation. Where a team shines, as you did, it was in the cross-examination questions. But by allowing us to ask more cross-examination questions, that even shows more knowledge and ability to answer the question. So my feedback for improvement is just to shorten your answers to the cross-examination questions, be succinct, answer them, and then move on, because then that would give us the opportunity to ask more questions and to listen to more of your knowledge. But overall, a very good job.
I agree. It was easy to hear you all when you were providing answers to our questions, just as it was when you were reading your opening statement. And for bigger teams, that can be a challenge, because sometimes people try to go so fast to make the time that they could have just sat there and said nothing, for all the good it does me, because I can't understand it. So really, really great job pacing yourselves during the opening statement in particular. With my question about, what kind of limits are being placed on government, for example, I was really trying to give you all an opportunity to demonstrate learning from other parts of the textbook. Early on in your opening statement, you did reference many different constitutional principles, including due process, for example, that really undergird our system. And Unit 6 is about, contemporary challenges, but it's also the tie everything together unit. And so I would encourage you, in Unit 5, it gets really specific with, the Brandenburg test, for example. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There are really strong, clear, specific examples that you all could have cited in response to those questions. So I encourage you, whether it's with We the People or in general, always think about how you can tie your learning together, because that really shows a deep understanding to folks like us. But again, it has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you all this afternoon. I'm so excited for you and for your state for having you as part of its future. And that applies to the country as well. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.